Okay, so I have a theory on why I think it's easier for men to date than for women. And it's very simple. It's because men have a lot more options and a lot better of options abundantly. Like, think about it. If a guy walks into a bar, the chances of him meeting a cool girl that he could potentially date are a lot higher than a girl walking into a bar and meeting a guy that she could potentially see herself dating.
Oh, wait, you're serious?
I don't normally do this, lady, but I'm gonna admit you are partially correct. And by partially, I mean to say 10 to 20% correct, which still means that you're completely wrong. In order for that statement to even be remotely true, you have to ignore the vast majority of men out there. These are the kind of men that tick the arbitrary boxes on your ick list because they don't wear the correct proportion of fabrics in their boxers. The only way for this statement to be considered even the slightest bit true is if you're referring to the top tier percentage of men and only them. In that context, yes, they have a significantly higher chance of meeting women at bars, clubs, and at the gym, but that's because these men are the pinnacle of masculinity and you fawn over them every time. But to the remaining 80 to 90% of men out there, this logic is absolutely bonkers. These dudes are only approached by women in a bar if they want free drinks or to bum a smoke, and after they get what they want, they'll go right back to treating that man as if he's invisible, which means that you think that a majority of men out there don't exist, which is almost impressive.
And that's just because men, the general population, has a lot higher creeper to cool ratio. And I'm not saying that there's not men that aren't creepy. There's a lot of men that aren't creepy, but they're just sometimes harder to find.
Oh, come on!
All right, class is in session, gentlemen and gents. I'm gonna go ahead and fix this sentence and replace the word creepy with any of the following words to make that sentence reveal what this woman means. Not wealthy, has no money, not in peak shape, drives an average car, has an unexciting job, doesn't wear designer clothes, doesn't travel to exotic locales, isn't a captain of industry, isn't rich, has no trust fund, doesn't own a helicopter, not obscenely wealthy, doesn't waste money, thrifty, or doesn't have a chiseled jawline. Now, I know I'm missing a whole slew of words, so go ahead and add on to that list in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think. You see, in the modern woman's mind, if a man doesn't have any of those things, he is automatically creepy and somehow makes her feel unsafe. The average self-respecting man isn't creepy, woman. You just think he's a peasant, and we're not peasants, and we refuse to be treated as such. As self-respecting men, we know that we're pretty awesome because we actually know our worth, and that's one of the many reasons why we'll pay more attention to the asteroids machine in the back of the bar instead of talking to you. It's a way more satisfying experience at a fraction of the cost. Seriously, look at that thing of beauty. How could you say no to that?
Like, think about it. What do you need in a relationship? You need a girl that you can have fun with, you can talk to, that will be emotionally understanding, and those traits are a lot easier to find in women than they are in men. And I think this is also why you'll see girls get out of like 4-year relationships and not date for the next 4 years, but men will get out of a 4-year relationship and get into another serious relationship within the year.
It's on backwards.
Well, if we're making a list, men also want women who aren't going to fill their lives with needless drama. It also doesn't hurt if that particular woman isn't relentlessly riding the carousel as if there's a prize at the end of that particular venue. And the ability to be able to make a peanut butter sandwich without setting the entire kitchen ablaze is also a big plus in our books. And of course, men want feminine women, but you're not willing to be feminine for any man you deem unworthy of being in your presence, which is a vast majority of them. Chad has options because he represents the pinnacle of masculinity, and you want that, which is why he has a roster. And if he moves on to the next girl after dumping you, it's because he was never into you or that rancid sinkhole of joyless existence you're packing. But if a woman is doing the dumping, you can rest assured that man is most likely going to give up on dating altogether and go his own way, while the woman goes on to a few years of hedonistic bliss before slamming face first into the wall. And you have no real grasp of this, but one day you will. And when it happens, we're going to be sitting here laughing our frickin' heads off.
That's funny because it's so true.
So I might regret making this video because I feel like some girls are not gonna like me for saying these things. But one trope that I hear all the time is that girls hate dating and they're like, dating is trash, it sucks. And it totally does, but also doesn't have to. So the first reason, there's some like societal reasons for this happening that would probably be like an hour-long video to get into. But on the average, girls and women over the past, say, 15 to 20 years have become more accomplished, more attractive, and just generally better at life than men.
Are you sure?
Well, if you ask me, it's the exact opposite, sister. Women are actually worse off now than they were a few decades ago. Don't believe me? Well, then list off all the ways your life is better now than it was back in the 50s when women stayed in the home. Oh wait, I got some spare time. But think about it. You're basing this assumption on a combination of money, social media validation, and material possessions, things that are completely meaningless in the long run. You're miserable, drowning in debt, and empty on the inside in more ways than one. You think you're hotter because of the makeup you buy, and you think you're happy because you have an apartment you can barely afford. On top of that, you reach the age of 30 without bearing any children, which is literally your primary purpose for existing on this earth. So if anything, you failed miserably at life. Meanwhile, men are doing what men do, adapting to the harsh conditions, and we're starting to thrive in them. So all you're left with at the end of the day is a lukewarm cup of coke and a cat that's just waiting for you to perish so it can get a warm meal.
Like, I truly think that there are just more women these days that are like the full package than there are men. You literally see it in college graduation rate. But as a result, we as women have pretty high standards for men that literally aren't out there. And as a result, the men that you are gunning for, who are like attractive and successful and nice, the level of girl that they are getting, even though you think in your mind should be attainable for you, they are also finding the whole package because they're like,
Bingo! How fun!
on that end, you either need to lower your standards or upgrade yourself. I'm of the latter camp. I personally have worked on myself so much over the past couple of years, and it's not a lie. I'm dating much higher quality people than I was 3 years ago.
Sorry, sweetheart, that's just not how things work. You can build your body, eat better, and try to artificially make yourself more appealing to men, but that's like trying to challenge Zeus to a boxing match and winning clean in the first round. The odds of that happening are so slim that it's a number that is almost impossible to pronounce. And that's because you conned yourself into thinking that you can win a fight against millions of years worth of biological instinct. Men have a natural desire to fertility because men are programmed to find the most ideal mate to create life and keep the species going. And men can do this for a substantially longer time than women, which is why men can build themselves up and become more desirable as they age, and you can't. There's no beating around the bush. A woman is at her peak value when she's in between the ages of 18 to 25, and in your case, that ship has long since sailed. And those quote-unquote quality men that you're dating, well, that well will dry up sooner rather than later, because those men will have better, younger, and more attractive options, and you will be left in the dust for the next generation because you wasted the one thing that made you attractive in the first place.
Secondly, one thing that we all need to learn, people are given what they accept. And trust me, I am not perfect. Every single time I've given a guy a chance, if he's acted slightly dickish to me, let's say he doesn't take me on a date, not once has that person changed their ways. If you let someone treat you like, they're gonna continue to treat you like. And sometimes when you don't respond to someone treating you poorly, you have to also accept that that means that they might go away. But in the long run, it's a good thing that they go away.
You hear what I said? Do you hear what I said? Hey, pal, your excuses are your own.
And whose fault is that exactly? The reason you gave these dudes chance after chance, even after they treated you like ish, is because you thought they were hot and you desperately wanted them. And you were hoping if you could continue to see him and provide him with ample time in the bedroom, that would buy you enough time to change him into the man you desired. And you're so delusional to think that you had the power to do that because of your main character syndrome and your inability to tell the difference between crappy romantic comedies and documentaries. Well, that man put up with your insipid nagging because the bedroom fun was ample enough and you were still considered low effort. But the second he got annoyed with you, he moved on because the juice wasn't worth the squeezing anymore. And the end result is that you wasted so much time on these men that any man of quality isn't interested in you or your college degree, your job, or your trust issues. You played the game of life and you failed, and therein lies your reward. But what's extremely impressive to me through all of this is that the game of life was set to extremely easy mode for you, and yet you somehow ended up completely and utterly failing.
No one makes friends with a failure. Okay? Do you understand?
I'm back on Bumble, and I'm using this opener where the guy gets to choose 1, a dad joke, 2, a fun fact, or 3, I roast them. And boy, are men gluttons for punishment!
Should be interesting.
Matched with this gentleman, who kindly asked for a roast. I said, you look like the Lorax if you tried the devil's lettuce.
That's the joke.
If there's one thing I've learned in my adventures across the cosmos, it's to never underestimate a woman's delusion into thinking that she's funny. You're trying to roast a guy by telling him he looks like an obscure Dr. Seuss character. That is not a roast. It's barely even a burn, and it's pretty pathetic because that's clearly the best you could do. That dude looks like he's a 70s adult film star whose specialty is sharks. And I think it's plain to see that none of these guys ever talked to her again because she's already showed she was incapable of creating even the slightest of chuckles, which wouldn't surprise me. She strikes me as the type of woman who thinks she's funny because men told her she's funny looking, which she probably perceived as a compliment. So let's go ahead and take a look at these so-called roasts and see what we can do. Because even if we're half asleep and barely coherent, we will still come up with better roasts than this used up broad. So let's do this.
Our next victim, take a good look. He asked for a roast. I said, you look like if Patrick Dempsey and the least attractive Baldwin brother had a son. Didn't specify which Baldwin brother, dealer's choice, and frankly, it was more of a compliment. He responded and said, who are they? And failed the vibe check miserably.
Let's do this.
Well, I'd say this guy looks more like a washed up early 90s background dancer from the Jersey Shore, but I guess that's just me. But you strike me as the type of woman whose most interesting story about herself is getting drunkenly plowed by Daniel Baldwin, who starred in such fantastic movies like Desert Thunder, a 1999 B movie directed by the Godfrey Ho of God's America, Jim Wynorski. The man is truly a national treasure, by the way. It's honestly not the worst cut and paste movie I've ever seen. The acting isn't great, but it's not terrible. You can definitely sit through it a number of times. Now, I'm not sure how to watch this movie anymore because it's not available on YouTube or streaming. But if you ever have the opportunity, check it out. Because spending 78 minutes watching a movie starring a washed up Daniel Baldwin is still significantly more entertaining than spending a few hours on a dinner date with this broad. I mean, don't get me wrong, the movie sucks worse than this chick ever could on her best day, but that's definitely a ride that'll be more fun, and the odds of getting a disease are way lower. Plus, if you get with this chick, you're gonna come into contact with way more sand.
Here's our next guy. He asked for a roast. I said, you give off both serial killer and frat douche vibes. And he agreed with the frat douche thing. He said, elaborate on the serial killer vibes. I need to figure out how to hide that better, apparently. Yeah.
Let's play.
I'd say he closely resembles Ryan Gosling's lesser talented and mentally challenged cousin, but then again, that's kind of a compliment. But you are the kind of lady that serial killers would actively avoid because you're not even worth stalking for more than 5 minutes. I can't even fathom a world where even Hannibal Lecter himself would be hungry enough to want to hunt you down and serve you with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Yeah, I know it's Chianti, but she probably doesn't. Seriously, woman, you're so dull that even stalkers would get bored with you after 2 minutes. And to be honest, I can't even imagine a world where even a desperately lonely man who hasn't had human contact in over a decade would want to sit at the same table for you than more than 10 seconds before wishing he'd be struck by a freak lightning bolt. I mean, if we're being honest here, the only thing that's even remotely stimulating about you ends after the man sees you naked for the first time.
Finally, this gentleman asked for a roast. I said, you look like you wear the same pair of socks for 3 straight days till your mom finally washes them.
That's the joke.
Nah, he's more of a man who failed the interview to become an apprentice brawny man cosplayer. Again, another compliment. But you look like the kind of woman who washes her granny panties in the sink because your mother failed you as a child. You strike me as the type of woman who steals her man's favorite plaid shirt and refuses to give it back after the breakup, which is something that happens to you on a regular basis. But by breaking up, I mean the man gets out of your bed and goes home in the morning after the whiskey sours wore off. And that man, as soon as he gets home, he'll take the loss of his favorite plaid shirt because venturing back to your one-bedroom apartment to get his clothes back sounds like a significantly more painful experience than diving headfirst into the bear pit at his local zoo during feeding time. But I feel like I'm being fairly generous with these assessments because you're the kind of woman a gigolo will pay when he wants you to stop pestering him, because not even the most destitute of male prostitutes will ever be that desperate for money. And that is gonna do it for today's video, gentlemen and gents. And as always, if you're new here and find that my particular brand of comedy is bringing you to the brink of laughter, then why don't you scroll on down, click that like and subscribe button, ring the notification bell, leave a comment or two, and let's give the good old-fashioned middle finger to the YouTube algorithm. Because the subs we got here are some of the finest subs that the universe has to offer. Thank you so much for checking out the new video, and until next time, peace out, homies.